Hey Fish Fam, today I want to talk about wood. For a small aquarium, you can go down to a pet store, you can pick something up like, you know, the large Galapagos wood, or huge chunks of Mopani. And these can be really cool centerpieces for your tank, but if you're doing a large tank like I am, even the biggest pieces you can get, something like this, is, you know, I think the MSRP on this is 50 bucks, something around there. And it's a cool piece of wood, but in a large tank, this won't even be seen. This will just be a tiny little feature in the corner. And there are a lot of places online that will sell large pieces of wood, but that's kind of an outrageous waste of money. Shipping large pieces of wood is prohibitively expensive, and you're really just stuck with what they have. So I want to talk to you a little bit about where I got my wood from. So I want to show you what I did here. The closest river to where I live is the Pecos River. So what I did is I go over to Google Maps and I load up the river and I load up satellite view and I zoom down on the river and I just sort of start dragging around looking for a seasonal floodplain. Anywhere where when it gets heavy rain, the riverbank is going to overflow. And here, this is where I found the wood. You can see massive piles of driftwood on the satellite imagery. Now, it's kind of hard to get access to these areas in a lot of cases because usually areas around rivers, at least in the US, tend to be cattle land, but along the railroad tracks there are some access roads, and some of those, you know, in this case are open because people go over and they get firewood and stuff out of the driftwood. So we were able to go over there and we came back with this truckload of wood here. The largest of these pieces is about 6 feet long and about 3.5 feet wide. Now, this is significantly better price-wise than buying something online. If you have someplace that has massive piles, you can go out and you can pick the pieces that you like. We spent about $15 in gas going each way. For cleaning this up, I'm using a wire brush, I'm using a chisel, and I went and I bought a $100 pressure washer just to speed things up a little bit. So the total cost of this truckload of wood here is about $145. Now, this is something that you can do pretty much anywhere. If it's going to have massive piles of driftwood on the map, it's almost certain that it's still going to be there when you go look. The map photos will be a couple years old, but places where they clean these up, you usually won't find these massive piles lying around. So, in my experience, in a couple different places, this has been a really good indicator of there being stuff to find. Now, cleanup on these is basically the same no matter what size your piece is. I'll go ahead and do some full cleanups on some of the larger ones attached to the end of this. But basically, you know, cheap wire brush. I'll just run it through all of the grooves, knocking out anything large, anything that comes out easily. Any place where there is still bark, I will take a chisel and pop it loose. I'll go over the areas where I've removed the bark again with the wire brush, and then I'll just hit the entire thing with the pressure washer. Any place that there's a crack, I'll use a fine point. Anywhere else, I'll use the broad stroke on it. And it takes about 5 to 10 minutes for a fairly decent sized piece. You know, this is 3.5 feet long. It's kind of a cool, wavy, wiry shape. We've got a whole lot of this stuff, so I'm going to have a lot of selection in what I want to do for decoration, especially compared to, you know, the buy-it-online garbage that Joey did for his big tank. I think if you're going to DIY something, you DIY it. You know, you don't cheat and have somebody else build the whole thing for you. That's no good. So here I'm pulling out some bark that was in one of the large knot holes on this tree. This is something that takes a while. I'm not really sure what this tool is. It's like a one-sided pry bar that has a rubber handle on it. It's something that I got from my grandpa. There's no labels or anything, but these work really well. I also resorted to using a screwdriver instead of the chisel that I was using, because the screwdriver had a longer handle, and really I was just using it to pry stuff off. I wasn't using it to actually do any sort of wood cutting. So this worked pretty well. It took a long time to dig out of this, but it ended up giving a really nice little cave that I think I'll probably have some Plecostomus breeding and things going on in. Most of the places on this that have bark, the bark came out pretty easily. This is a pretty old stump, and it just took a little bit of scraping to get it out. The whole stuff just didn't rot well. Pressure washing is pretty simple. The machines usually have an adjustable tip on the end where you can get a wide angle or you can get a fine point. The finer it is, the more pressure you're going to get. The big thing you're going to worry about when you're doing this is making sure that you're going to be getting all of the dirt out that you can. A lot of the bark and things that might still be left over, you're really going to have to scrape off by hand. Any loose rotting pieces of wood or anything you're going to have to pull out manually. But the big thing is, again, mud. You want to make sure if this is something that's been in the water that you're not going to be transferring eggs for anything weird into your tank. And it helps get rid of some of the fungal spores and things like that. It'll make the wood just look real gross when you move it in. You're still going to end up with a fair amount of fungal growth on any sort of wood that you get, but usually in a month or two it'll go away and you won't have any issues. One of the big problems with these things is the adjustable tips don't tend to be made very well, so this one's a cheap Harbor Freight one, and adjusting the tip ended up unscrewing itself and spraying everywhere on me instead of coming out correctly. Any of the softer wood, the fine point does a pretty good job of just ripping up, which saves a lot of hassle for later cleanup. These sort of half stumps where you just really have the front face, the backs can be pretty gross, so I'll spend a bit of time cleaning the muck out of them. Most of the wood that's visible here I'm going to end up scraping off because it increases the weight a lot. The wood on the inside is a lot more likely to rot than the stuff on the outside at this point. And it's just, it's a big cumbersome piece of stuff that you're never going to see the stuff on the back of it. It's just going to sit and be a facade. So the more of the crap on the back you can get out, the better, generally.